with little explanation given as to why the Trump administration has declined to release nearly $7 billion in funding for school programs. Now, it's very important to know this funding was already allocated by Congress, who has the power over the purse. So this is something the Trump administration is doing that Congress should be handling. The withheld money will affect before and after school programs, summer school programs, teacher training, hiring translators for non-English speaking students, as well as mental health and technology services. Trump administration officials claim that the funds are under review and no decision has been made yet. The move, deemed illegal by teachers' unions and likely to be challenged in the courts, has been called, quote, catastrophic by Jody Grant, who works to expand after-school programs for students. Grant estimates that the funds being withheld support about 1.4 million students, mostly in lower-income districts. Joining us now is Jody Grant, Executive Director of the After School Alliance. Jody, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me and for really taking the time to focus on this critical program for our families.
Because with so much going on, this is one of the things that could kind of go under the radar. And, you know, I am a product of after-school programs. We were talking during the break. I used to love going there. That's where all my friends were. I didn't think I was learning. You said I was learning the whole time. You know, you get a snack. Now they get full meals. And some of these kids, this is the only meal they will eat that evening at the after school program. So talk about the actual impact on the ground.
So, you know, it's just, it's tremendous. I mean, we're talking about 1.4 million kids, 10,000 sites across America. And this isn't just the kids. This is their working parents, their employers. When we see kids don't have access to after school, they're less likely to come to school. They're less likely to graduate. Unfortunately, we see crime go up, all sorts of other inappropriate behaviors. And we see parents really struggling. So, you know, on the flip side is when kids are in after-school programs, as you said, like they're more likely to come to school, they're having fun. A lot of times they're doing something like a math Olympiad where they're having all of this fun at the same time they're learning math skills, but they don't even realize that they're learning these skills, or will focus on their passions and incorporate learning into that.
So what have school districts said? What's been their reaction to news that their funding is getting cut?
So this is drastic. The funding was supposed to be out on July 1st. And it's not just school districts, it's also community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, your Boys and Girls Clubs, your YMCAs, and they're struggling. So state education agencies who don't have the money are scrambling. And some are telling programs they need to shut down now, some of the summer programs. Many, when school opens up as early as August 1st in Texas, the programs won't be there if we don't get the money to have the contracts to pay the staff and to serve the kids.
You know, this is the OMB statement to Politico about these grant programs. Quote, initial findings have shown that many of these grant programs have been grossly misused to subsidize a radical left-wing agenda, and said that the public schools in New York used money for students who are immigrants or speak limited English to promote illegal immigrant advocacy organizations, the spokesperson said, without providing specifics according to those reporters. All the things that this administration often does is because of the left wing, somebody's doing something over here to affect the students. And that's not what was happening with these kids. This is so that working parents, people who are low income, middle class, right, can make sure that their kids are being fed, being taken care of while they're continuing to work, because parents don't get off at the same time as students.
No, it's, you know, I would say just go see these programs. Every year we do something called Lights On After School, where we showcase programs in local communities. These are kids getting academic support and enrichment. They're playing sports, they're doing community gardens, they're building robots, they're learning how to code. I mean, this is like American Pie, right? This is creating opportunities for our kids to keep them engaged in a very healthy way while their parents are working.
How are school districts fighting back against these cuts? I mean, I asked you before, like, how are they reacting? But how are they fighting back, or can they fight back?
You know, I think that's a great question, and there's a couple of things, which is one, some of them are scrambling to see if they can find, you know, rainy day funds to keep programs open a few extra days, a few extra weeks. But the other things they can do is call their members of Congress, call their state legislators, call their governors, call their attorney generals, and we're urging parents to do that too, to let them know and make sure this administration knows that this really isn't acceptable, that we need this money so that school can start and our kids have a place to go.
You know, flooding the phone lines at the Capitol is actually a really smart thing to do because those calls are actually logged.
Right.
They know how many people have called and what they've called about, but that's just my little public service announcement.
And people have also started to send letters to Democratic leaders. And Democratic leaders have gone, the progressive chair has gone to people and be like, this is your actual constituent who said something. I want to zoom out a little bit, Jody, because there are a lot of different types of cuts that would affect children kind of across the board. I'm going to look at this full screen of budget bill cuts affecting children. Reduces SNAP funding by around $186 billion and could impact school nutrition programs. Reduces Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program, that's CHIP, by $1 trillion. CHIP covers 7 million children. Caps refundable portion of the child tax credit, limiting the ability of the country's lowest income parents to access the credit, and adds new voucher program paying for private school scholarships, and that's according to the 19th. Talk about kind of how children in general are being impacted by the decisions made here in Washington, D.C.
It's really tragic, because this is our future, right? And we need our children to be, our country's future, our economic future. And I think what's really sad is it's happening on all fronts.
Yeah.
So you just talked about all the things that just were passed in the budget bill. What we're talking about is another $7 billion that has literally been frozen, that is going to directly impact students in our schools all across America. And I think in many cases, it's rural America that's going to get hit the hardest, because that is where, when we talk about what can school districts do, they're on a shoestring.
Yeah.
There's no wealthy philanthropist in their neighborhood that can help cover some of the costs that are going on, or as many businesses in the neighborhood. So we're really worried about what this means for our children and our country. And I think, we're going to see the impacts over time, but these after-school impacts, we're going to see them immediately.
And one more question in the less than a minute that we have. Let's put up element 6 on the screen. I don't have time to read all of the DOGE cuts to the education department that will hit $881 million Institute of Education, because 89 education projects. And I want to show that, in addition to what Eugene just brought up, and just ask real fast, how will the public education system survive at this rate, between the cuts we have there, the cuts in the current budget law, and the reason why you're here, the pullback of funding for after-school programs?
No, I don't know, because the oversight is really essential. That's how we get quality. That's how we make sure we have professional development, how we have training, how we have research. So I think all of this, it compounds, and it's going to be a struggle for our schools, for all of the resources that support our schools, whether it's community-based organizations, museums, parks and recs, and others.
Jody Grant, thank you very much for coming to The Weekend.
Thank you for having me.